Welcome to our podcast on homelessness in Placer County. I'm Bonnie Gore, and I serve on the Placer County Board of Supervisors. I represent District 1, which is primarily the city of Roseville and the unincorporated areas of West Placer County. Placer County has about 417,000 residents, and of those we have about 700 residents who are homeless. Placer County has the lowest rate of homelessness in Northern California, and our goal is to drive that rate even lower. My goal is to inform and educate the community about the good things we're doing to address this issue, and also discuss the challenges we face. My conversation today about homeless is with the Placer County Sheriff's Office and their Homeless Liaison team. Sergeant Irvin started working for the Placer County Sheriff's Office in 2006. He has served as a field training officer, a member of the Special Enforcement Team, Bike Patrol Team, OHV Team, Transportation Unit, and as the lead instructor for Emergency Vehicle Drivers Training. He is currently the Field Operations Administrative Sergeant, where he oversees scheduling and supervises the Mobile Command Vehicle, Bike Patrol Team, and the Homeless Liaison deputies. Deputy Williams has also worked for the Placer County Sheriff's Office since 2006. He has served as a jail training officer, critical incident response team member, less lethal weapons instructor, bike patrol team member, OHV team member, and is currently a homeless liaison deputy. He was also the Auburn Elks Lodge Deputy of the Year in 2021. And now my conversation with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Would you tell us about the Sheriff's Homeless Liaison team, your deputies, what you do, and how does your team work with the homeless?
So the Sheriff's Department has what we call Homeless Liaison deputies, which is part of the greater Homeless Liaison team within Placer County. And that team consists of the Sheriff's Office, Health and Human Services, Probation, several nonprofit entities all work together to be able to help address any kind of homeless concerns or issues within Placer County. As far as the Sheriff's Office and the deputies, they're kind of the grounds on the boots on the ground, so to speak. They're going out and making proactive contact with transients within the community or homeless within the community, whether it be individuals in our shopping centers, on bike trails, private properties that we've been asked to come out to. And they're being that first contact with the homeless and finding out kind of what that individual status is, really building a rapport, getting to know what it is they need to be able to maybe improve their living situation. And then they're kind of the conduit to connect those homeless individuals to the rest of the members of the team. And then also for the rest of the community, I mean, we want to make sure we maintain the quality of life within Placer County that we've all come to know and love. And whereas they try to treat the person first as kind of our first priority, the homeless individual, and getting them assistance, getting them to improve their life, they also look at the aspect of the enforcement of our laws and ordinances within the county. So they'll look at if enforcement is the proper action, or is it connecting this individual with whatever resource it may be.
Let me ask this question of you, Deputy Williams, because you go out and meet with these folks regularly. It's not just a one and done. So the Homeless Liaison team doesn't just go out one time and talk to folks. You go back regularly, yeah. Correct? Tell me about how often you go out and how often you meet with the same people.
Feels like it's every night that we work, which is 4 nights, for me, 4 nights a week. But it could be multiple times in a night. It really depends on the calls that we get, or just to pull over and talk about what their plan may be for the future, and if I can assist in any way to get them in the direction that they want to be.
You know these people by a first name basis, correct?
I do, and they know my first name too. I don't hold anything back when it comes to that. If you want to develop relationships with people where they trust you, you have to open some doors to make them feel like they can tell you certain things that they may not tell other deputies or other people.
How do you build trust with the homeless who are living on the streets?
we already have to know that they already don't trust a lot of people. They've been let down in their life. So it's a long process to gain anybody's trust, and especially someone who is unhoused. It's repetition with being yourself, being honest. Honest is one of the main things that they look for. If you can't do something, you tell them you can't do that, or the answer is no. If it's yes, you follow through, and that's how the trust is built.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's not an easy job, to keep going and meeting with the same people on a regular basis, trying to encourage them, trying to ask them to, hey, if you want help, you can get help. I'll help you get mental health support. I'll help you get substance abuse support, right? You're just continuing to try to get people to a place where they say yes.
I mean,
help.
Right. And it could be really anything. I mean, those are really good key points that you just, hit on, but it's also, little things, right? Sometimes they need bus passes to get to the other end of town, to get to a doctor's appointment or to the DMV. We provide those. But again, it builds trust when you show up on the time that you say you're going to show up, and you provide what you say you're going to provide, right? So it's not always the bigger things like the programs and stuff like that. It's the little things that start building it. And then we kind of go from there.
In what areas of the county do you tend to see more of the homeless? And so a lot of times we see people more in the higher density areas of our community. What are some of the factors that draw people to a community?
So I think obviously Placer County Sheriff's Office, we deal with the unincorporated areas. So we're not dealing with too many of our major urban areas like the city of Roseville. So for the Sheriff's Office, the highest density we have of homeless is in the North Auburn, DeWitt Government Center area. And a lot of that is because of all the services that are available and provided within the DeWitt Center. And that's everything from, you have the Sheriff's Office, you have probation, Health and Human Services is there. You have 2 different homeless shelters are in that location. There's numerous other private entities that come into that area to provide services, whether it's showers in that local community or things of that nature as well. So that inevitably is kind of a draw to that area when you have all these services in one spot. So for the county, that's our biggest condensed area of homeless population. But I know Justin and I were talking earlier today about some of the other factors that just draws people in general to certain areas. Some of it being general stuff as far as locations with water. So your creeks and things like that, they'll often be drawn to sources of water. You were mentioning
commercial areas, close to stores or food or stuff like that.
Areas that have ease of access is typically where we'll see them a lot.
Which makes sense as to why you're going to find more homeless in areas where you've got more population, right? If you have business corridors, parks, right? There's water, there's shade. Makes sense. You talked a little bit about the work you do building trust. Can you give us an example of maybe a typical day in the life of Deputy Williams? What's a general interaction with somebody who's homeless on the streets?
Well, we wear many hats. So sometimes an enforcement hat comes on, sometimes the enforcement hat comes off, and the other side, comes on, where you have to almost step outside of the sheriff's role, right, or deputy sheriff's role, and really get on their level of communication. You're speaking to another human being. But on the other side, there is the enforcement aspect of it. We have to make sure that our citizens, our community, our business owners, the people going and shopping are safe as well. And so there's an enforcement side that comes into play, where we have to go out and enforce certain laws and ordinances within the community to make sure the community is safe. So the shift is, it can go from one end of the spectrum to the other. One minute I could be citing somebody or taking him to jail. When I leave there, it could be a one-on-one conversation, with this individual, trying to figure out what their needs may be to get them to where they they want to be.
Every night and every interaction is different.
It's different all the time. Yeah.
Let's talk about common myths about homelessness. What's a common myth that you might want to share with people?
So I think, one thing to start off initially talking about, when you talk about homeless, everybody tends to fits them into one group. For the most part, your homeless community in general falls into kind of two groups. You have your first-time homeless individual, and typically they run into that kind of situation. Normally, it's a financial need. Something happened financially that led to them, losing their housing that they had, or being kicked out of a residence and not having the means to be able to afford their own right away. And those individuals typically are very accepting of any kind of assistance and help. And normally, as soon as we can get them connected with whatever service is appropriate for them, they're back into some form of housing, whether it's an emergency shelter that then transitions into more permanent housing. And then we have what we at the Sheriff's Office probably deal with more often than not is our chronic homeless population. And those individuals, typically financial is not their biggest reason why they're homeless. They have underlying root causes that have led to whether it be untreated or undiagnosed mental health issues, substance abuse issues that they haven't addressed that then have led to them, not being able to hold down employment or not being able to maintain adequate housing because of that. And they've ended up homeless for that reason. So then we have to deal with trying to address that root cause before we can ever address their housing issues. So I think that's kind of a myth, is everybody thinks like, oh, a lot of homeless people, they're just down on their luck. If they just had money, they'd be okay. And that second group, a lot of times, if you just gave them money, that's not going to help them. They need help addressing that root cause that led to them being homeless, which is, like I said, maybe help with mental health, maybe help with, substance abuse. So I think that's probably one of the biggest myths that we run into. And then the other one is that they don't want to be homeless. There is a group of populace that's the lifestyle they choose. They don't want our assistance. We can offer it until we're blue in the face, and they just don't want assistance as a lifestyle that they've chosen. And that's something that, as recent as this year, a neighboring county actually did a study where they went out and talked to 198 different individuals that were homeless, tried to get them into appropriate services for them, offered them services, and they had one taker out of 198. And now, whereas that may not be a stat from our county, it is a similarity we see amongst the chronic homeless, to where we'll go out time and time again trying to get them services, trying to encourage them to engage with HHS or whatever it may be. And a lot of times they just aren't willing to accept it.
Let me ask a follow-up on that, because I've heard that there are people who just want to be homeless. They don't want to deal with the regular trappings of society, and that's their choice as long as they're not breaking the law, right? But I've heard that it takes 10, 15, 20 interactions with someone who's homeless to maybe even get them to the place where they're willing to say, yes, I want help now. And based on what you just shared, that study where only 1 out of almost 200 wanted help, what's been your experience? As far as, there are those people that don't want help at all, and that's the way they want to live. But what's been your experience with people who are like that, maybe getting them to a place of moving on?
And it's all about it's all about the follow-up and continuing to conduct outreach with these individuals. It's not that we don't take no for an answer, but we're going to continue to ask. Worst thing they could say is no, right, at the time. But then you ask them the next day or the following day, and it could be a yes. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes they do get tired of the lifestyle. And this is where the rapport comes in at, because if they see me, they'll flag me down. Or it's not just me, it's the other 3 deputies as well in the unit. They'll flag them down because we all have similar personalities, and they will let them know that, hey, can I get the number for the social worker that works on the team? And then we will get them the number, or we'll bring that social worker out with us, and we will connect them that way, and then they can do their thing from there. But it does happen. But again, we're never not going to ask. And this is why I may run into the same person 4, 5, 6 times in a shift because it could change within an hour, right? So it's one of those things that I'll always follow up with them, and I'll say, hey, the offer's still on the table. If you want me to bring this social worker out, you just let me know when the time's ready. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But again, like tonight, we'll run into the same people and ask the same questions.
And maybe at some point they'll say, yes, I want that help.
Yeah, and sometimes they do.
And I think that's the value of the homeless liaison team, is that there's continued follow-up and offers of assistance to help people get what they need as far as supportive services. Mm-hmm. And that makes a difference because at least there's an opportunity when people are ready.
And that's one of the key things with the team, by being able to build that rapport and have that time by being a specialty unit to be able to get to know the individuals that are homeless, is they learn what is that individual person's need, what's their roadblock, what's their hang up that's making them say no to the service. Is it a specific thing that we could go and talk to a program and say, hey, is there any way we can tweak this a little bit and this individual will then be accepting of this help? So that's something that is great because they spend so much time with them. They're able to learn that information and then go to HHS or gathering or whoever it may be, and talk to them about, hey, this is why they keep saying no. Is there anything we can do about that? And a lot of times they're able to come to some kind of compromise or agreement that gets that person into some kind of assistance.
That's great. Let's talk about the changing legal landscape. We have the federal mandates like the Martin versus Boise decision, and then we've got some statewide challenges as well. How have these legal decisions affected the deputy sheriff or the sheriff's office, your ability to deal with the homeless?
So, the legal landscape in general, Martin v. Boise, the sheriff's office, it's nothing new for law enforcement to have a case law come out and have to, look at what we do, go over policies, maybe make adjustments based on whatever case laws come out. Martin v. Boise is one specifically that is still going through appeals and litigation, and there's potential for it going all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that's one that we really don't know how that's ultimately gonna end. But we've had plenty of statewide legislation that's come out of Sacramento over the past decade that has had effects on what we do, and it may not have been a direct effect on us, but there's stuff with penalties of certain crimes that were reduced, where you may not think of it on face value, but like I talked about before with unintended consequences on stuff. In the past we had petty theft would be a good example. Repeat offenders of petty theft would actually eventually at some point face a substantial amount of incarceration. There were times where our partners in the district attorney's office or even probation were able to use that kind of as a tool to encourage a person to take maybe a drug treatment program as opposed to incarceration, or certain things like that, to be able to encourage them to address maybe what the root cause was of their homelessness or some of the things they were doing. With reduced penalties, the individual doesn't have the same amount of incarceration time hanging over their head, and sometimes they're not as motivated to do those diversion programs. So that's just kind of some aspect of how it's legal legislative changes and or case law affects how we do things. It's just something we have to adapt and figure out the best way to move forward for our community.
In regards to Martin versus Boise and our new mobile temporary shelter, right? So Martin versus Boise says you can't enforce no camping if you don't have a place for somebody to sleep, to rest. And now we have the mobile temporary shelter up in North Auburn. How has that affected your organization's ability to enforce no camping?
So specifically, when you get into that, as far as like evening camping and public areas, it does allow certain levels of enforcement with our municipal codes and county codes and stuff that we have within Placer County, as long as there's space available, and whether it be, that's not just necessarily MTS, it's also the congregate or mid-placer shelter that we have as well, and or any other kind of housing or alternative that we can offer the individual. So it helps with being able to enforce certain things, But there are unintended consequences of things like the mobile temporary shelter, as far as we have talked before about the disbursement of individuals that might have all clumped together in one area that maybe don't want to comply with rules and regulations and things that they are required to participate in something like the mobile temporary shelter. And they choose then to go out into the community. Now we have them on private property or in our businesses or in the surrounding areas. So it helps in some aspects, but it's all something we have to kind of adapt.
So right now we don't have a whole lot of people camping any longer on our government center campus up in North Auburn, right? Because if you have an open bed, you can enforce no camping. They can either go to the mobile temporary shelter or they have to move on, correct?
Correct.
Now, if they move on, they go to another park someplace or they go behind a business, then you have to address people camping elsewhere, correct? And so you can perhaps enforce that, but then they pick up and move again.
Correct.
That is not easy, is it?
It's not, but also it comes with a mutual respect. So building the rapport with certain individuals or all individuals, they will either, take you up on your offer of meeting with a social worker and finding out a solution. Or what we see a lot of times is they could move in with somebody temporarily until they can get back into the shelter, because sometimes they can get back into the shelter if there was a reason why they left. So that it could be a possibility that way. The ones that want to keep moving from place to place, we'll continue to do our job and contact them and ask them the same questions and see if they want help, and we'll go from there.
I talked about the no camping. Let's talk a little bit about things your office has done, the sheriff's office has done. What are the good things you think you all have done in addressing the homeless issue? And then what are some of the biggest challenges? I mean, I think you've done lots of really good things, but why don't you tell me, brag about yourselves a little?
Well, I'll brag about the team for sure. Justin and the other 3 deputies that are part of the HLD unit, they have done an outstanding job of taking advantage of the time that they have to build that rapport. It's pretty amazing when you go around with them or you walk into MTS or somewhere else where there's a group of homeless. And like I said, they know first names. They know history about their lives. Like they have that rapport built with them to where, they can go on a call, but another deputy that may have responded to the call, and they're giving that deputy a hard time. And as soon as, Deputy Williams walks in, he just looks at him and they're like, I know. Like they have the rapport, like he doesn't even have to say anything. So I'll brag on them that they do an outstanding job of using their time, building a rapport with the individuals to have that, be able to get through to our homeless community. But also just the ability in which they've worked with their partners. They know, everybody with an HHS that can help with somebody's placement and stuff, they, with probation, with everyone else, they do an outstanding job of working with all the other county entities, whether it be facilities or parks or, the Gathering Inn or whoever it may be, of really knowing the resources that are out there and who to contact to connect with for certain things. And they do an outstanding job of communicating with our businesses and explaining to them, to be able to take an enforcement action on a private property or on a business, there's certain things that actually need to be in place, signage, things of that nature. So they do a great job of educating our local businesses and citizens as far as what is needed for enforcement action, so that we can help with them if they have a concern, or going over concepts like CPTED, the crime prevention, environmental design, actually walking around a business or a residence and pointing out, things such as lighting, or that if you're trying to keep somebody out of an area, a creative way to do that without putting up a fence might be, rose bushes, things like that discourage somebody from going in there. But it's just a lot of like little things outside the box thinking they do that they've done outstanding on. As a supervisor of them, they make my job easy. So.
And I appreciate that importance of how do we take care of the quality of life of a community, which means our business owners and our residents, and what are the things that somebody can do to keep the homeless from sleeping in front of the door of a business, right? Or breaking into their trash cans, what have you. And you're really working proactively with our community members, our businesses, to help make it easier for them.
Mm-hmm. It's the education part of it.
Yeah. And let's talk about the biggest challenge for your office as you deal with the homeless issue.
So I think probably one of our biggest challenges, like I mentioned, the chronic homeless are the primary homeless individuals that the team deals with, and a large percentage, upwards of probably, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I'd say probably upwards of 90% have some level of either mental health that they're dealing with, or substance abuse issues that they're dealing with. And part of the problem the team runs into, like we've talked about, is they'll spend a bunch of time trying to encourage somebody to be open to a program of some kind to get help. And it's not necessarily housing, it could be treatment. And we'll finally get that breakthrough moment with that person to where they're like, yes, I want, Justin, I want treatment, get me into some kind of substance abuse treatment. And then there's not one available. And if we can't get them in that moment, that person may change their mind 2 days, 3 days later, or by the simple nature of dealing with the homeless community, they may have moved on to where we can't find them. And so then by the time we do find them, we've lost that space. So really one of our biggest challenges is we have to have the resources that when that person's willing to accept it, we can go. And that's kind of they put a lot of time and effort getting that person to that point, to then if we can't come through with that service, then kind of back to where we started.
Yeah.
And
that's absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, right, what you're trying to do is really help individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I so admire that. You mentioned you have a passion for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work. I think it would be very difficult for somebody to say, hey, this is the group of people I want to work with, folks on the streets who are dealing with substance abuse issues, mental health issues. But you have a passion for it, and you've seen good things come out of it, right? It's definitely hard, but then you've seen some success stories.
Absolutely. And that's what I think refills the passion for it, right? It is a small percentage, but it's that small percentage that keeps you going, right? Many success stories, one of which we had a chronic offender. He was getting arrested 3 times a day. And he had built up, I think it was 13 warrants at one time. But he finally, wanted treatment, got in. And this is the individual that I was talking about earlier about how he finished. He was able to acquire housing on his own. He now teaches the program, and we were able to work with the court system we drove up and we cleared the warrants. We actually met with him in Chico, and we were able to clear everything up. And it was that moment where this person had been homeless for many, many, many years. And, it seemed like his demise was going to just be on the streets. But with, I want to call it nagging, but the constant contacts and everything, maybe it was the nagging that brought him to the point of, okay, I'll go try it. And then look where he is now. He has a job. He teaches the classes now. He has a place, on his own. So it's stuff like that makes you want to keep doing it, because the one person out of 25 or whatever would make it worthwhile, right?
You gave him hope.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was a lot of nagging, but you did give him hope, and his life got changed around.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. I had an experience not that long ago at a festival in Auburn of an individual that, even prior to this role, homeless member of our community, dealt with him several times, arrested him several times, and ran into him at the festival. And you could tell immediately he was clean, he was sober. Came up and asked like, hey, do you remember me? And it took me a minute. I knew he looked familiar, but then, we started talking, and he's like, at that time, I hated you guys. He's like, I hated you guys, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. And that, like William said, that makes it all worth it.
Oh yeah. He used to cuss at us all the time, and, he was in a different state. And this is why you continue to meet with these people, because sometimes the state they're in at that time isn't always the person they are, right? So you have to, you have to continue to contact these people, and hopefully they'll take you up on the offer and want to meet with somebody or want to change. It's still there. It's a possibility.
Right. It's that never, ever, ever give up.
Yeah.
And thank you for not giving up. Thank you for the work that you do day in and day out,
Thank you.
day out with our homeless community, but with our community at large, right? We're a better place because of the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation about homelessness in Placer County. If you haven't had the chance yet, please listen to our other episodes at placer.ca.gov/podcasts. While you are there, you can check out the other Placer County podcasts, One Pill Can Kill, about the dangers of fentanyl, and The Placer Life, which shares interesting stories of the amazing people and places in beautiful Placer County. If you want to know more about the work of homelessness in Placer County, please go to placer.ca.gov/Bonnie Gore.